Hello and welcome to episode 122 of our SAP on Azure video podcast. Today is December 7th, and together with Robert and Goran, we are here to talk about anything related to SAP and Microsoft. Hello, everyone. Have you already had a ransomware attack? I hope not, but in several of my recent discussions, customers that I was talking to mentioned that this is the first topic that they talk about. This is basically on their daily agenda. More and more of that, the situation that customers are actually impacted by ransomware attacks. So it's basically not a matter of when or if you will be attacked, but when you will be attacked. So with this in mind, the question is, how can you best prepare for such an event? And what does it take to get back to business? So today, I am very happy to have Sebastian Ullrich and Martin Steiner with us today, who will give us some insights on how customers can use Azure to help protect them and reduce the time to get back to business. But as always, before we hand over to them, let's quickly take a look at some of the news from this week. And I actually want to start with two blog posts from our colleague Martin. Martin Pankratz is busy like always, and he created some really nice blog posts. One is a continuation of the whole SAP Private Link integration. And in this case now, he's focusing on the Web Application Firewall, the WAF on Azure. And that's actually a really cool thing because WAF, similar like some other scenarios that he talked about, enable us to use Private Link to connect to the Web Application Firewall, and then from there, connect to a lot of other resources. And the beautiful thing of the Web Application Firewall is that, first of all, we can now also inspect traffic. So we have a firewall in there, obviously, as the name is saying. Then it simplifies the whole security, the TLS configuration. Comes with a few other beautiful scenarios. So as always, Martin has spent a lot of time, a lot of details to outline what is required to set up SAP Private Link with the Web Application Firewall. And then, as always, he also has everything in GitHub repos, so you can easily give it a try for yourself. Now, in this specific scenario, he already talks about certificates and how you create a self-signed certificate, how you use it. But then obviously there's always the question, how do you renew these certificates? How you make sure that they don't expire? And that's where he created another really cool blog post where he talks about how to auto-renew these certificates. And that's actually really, really cool because on the Azure side, we have the possibility to listen to an expiry event. Now, let me see if I quickly find this. There's a near expiry event or something like that. Now, of course, now I don't find it as quickly, but what you can do is you can listen to this event. You can then create a logic app, and this logic app then can allow you to do this renewal of the certificates in your BTP environment. So that's a really, really cool end-to-end scenario, which allows you to simplify the way how you can ensure that you don't forget to renew your certificates. So whether you liked Private Link or not, I think this is definitely something that you should check out. It's a really cool flow that helps you to ensure that your certificates are always up to date. One last blog post that I quickly want to highlight is something that I've also been using when working with SAP architectures. So there have been, I think, quite a few years ago, Bertram Ganz had created a really nice PowerPoint presentation with lots of SAP icons or SAP diagrams for the Business Technology Platform. There weren't a lot of updates there, but here in this blog post, Geert Jan Klaps talks about how to generate BTP diagrams, basically. So there's also a project on GitHub which basically connects to the Discovery Center retrieves relevant icons there and then creates a nice icon map for you that you can use then to create or use in your PowerPoint presentations and stuff like that. So I thought this icon generator was also a really, really cool project. Good. So that's actually all from me for this week. But as mentioned before, security is something that is super, super important. And honestly, this is in a lot of customer discussions, the thing that I can immediately find a common discussion point with customers. And luckily, on the Azure side, we have a really fantastic, or we have some really fantastic tools to help you protect your workload on Azure. And for that, I'm super happy to have Sebastian and Martin here. Maybe before we go into the topic, maybe you can quickly introduce yourself. What are you doing at Microsoft? And then I'm really interested in what you have prepared to show us today.
Thank you, Holger. I will start. Sebastian Ullrich, my name, Cloud Solution Architect for SAP workloads here in Microsoft. And I'm helping customers to transition the SAP system landscapes to Azure. And I'm happy to have Martin with me today.
Yeah, and my name is Martin Steiner. I'm a cloud solution architect for security, compliance, and identity within Microsoft. So my daily job is helping customers implementing our solutions to get more secure and hopefully protecting them from a ransomware attack. And thank you, Holger, for having us here to really talk about that topic. I know normally, the topic is more like SAP related and really SAP intense, but as you mentioned, ransomware and security is just so an important point that I'm really happy that we're here to highlight that in your talk.
Perfect, thank you. Yeah, I'm really looking forward, and I think we have the experts here, so that this is really good. And so this is top of mind for a lot of customers. So what can you show us?
First, make a short intro why we are talking about ransomware today as a topic. And you already said it. We have more and more hackers try to infiltrate our systems, SAP systems, as well as other systems, and ransomware attacks are rising. So I think this topic is getting more and more important for everyone. Yeah. And on the other hand, when we look at our SAP landscapes, some years ago with the older SAP releases like NetWeaver and ECC 6.0, they were more isolated, more not that open as we see the newer landscapes and newer SAP releases today. So looking at S4HANA, for example, with the Fiori applications that are sometimes internet facing, or other software as a service products like SuccessFactors that are connected as a cloud service to this SAP backend system, there was really a lot of change in the architecture and how this important SAP system is connected to other systems. So there was really a lot of change, and some customers are not that far on the journey to S4HANA, but they also have, for example, SuccessFactors already integrated with the ECC system. And I had one key moment at a conference I've attended, and Holger, you were also there. So I met a lot of great people there, and in the keynote at this conference, the speaker of the keynote mentioned the ransomware and security as top of mind at the C-level of nearly every customer, or let's say every customer. And not only customer, also we as Microsoft take this very seriously because we are SAP customers as well. And to share a little story, so I met a lot of people. I already said that, and we talked about the new cool stuff that was announced, and also about the security part in the keynote. And so I asked them, regarding security, what do you think when you moved SAP to Azure? And it was really surprising, the answer, because they said, hey, why should I copy my SAP data into the internet? Or when I do so, I get hacked even faster. So this was really eye-opening for me, because we know our products very well, but I think there is a lot of fear in the market and at our customers and partners what cloud brings to the table, or if it's really secure, as we say. But first, let's take a short look how important this topic is for all of us and how often attackers get access to the data today. I think, Martin, you have prepared a slide for us.
I have, but yeah, but before we go into the slide mode, like the quote you just mentioned, like, okay, when I use cloud, then I'm more vulnerable and there is more risk. This was like a common discussion we had with a lot of customers when cloud came into the picture, and where it was so uncommon to move data out of your own environment and put it somewhere else. So I'm well aware of those discussions, but I would like to challenge that indeed. When you use you move your systems to the cloud, one, it's not in the internet. It's protected by a lot of mechanisms. Yeah. It's still private. So if you don't want to expose it, it's not exposed. On the other hand, you get a lot of techniques, technologies, solutions that helps you protect your system even better. And this is what really brings the value here. It's more secure, I would say, than having that on premises. And you mentioned, I think Holger mentioned in the beginning, if you search the internet for SAP and ransomware, you get a lot of results. And if you have like a double click on those results, like that Canadian supermarket or Asia or SpiceJet, none of those systems were in the cloud. All of those SAP systems were still on premises, but still vulnerable, and still the attacker was able to get into those systems. So I would say it's really it doesn't depend on where your system is running. If your system is not configured in the right way, if it's exposed to an attacker, it will be attacked. So it's more like how can you protect your systems than where you put them.
I fully agree. And I mean, for me, what is interesting, so I'm living here in Germany in Rheinland-Pfalz, and literally just the local government, I guess it's called, they were hit by a ransomware attack right now. And I mean, they're not yet in the cloud. They are still on premise. And this can really happen to everyone. I mean, we are living in a time now that very seldomly you really have completely isolated systems that only are in the intranet and that don't have any connectivity to the outside world. So even if your system is running on premise, in a lot of cases in the meantime, you have this internet connectivity. I mean, in most of the case, it is something that you want, but sometimes it's a misconfiguration. Sometimes it's not intentionally open up, even though it is running on premise. And that is for me something, I mean, again, looking here at the local government, but probably looking at a lot of other customers out there. The security is not part of their core business. I mean, the local government here around the corner, I wouldn't say they don't care about security, but they don't. This is not what they're here for.
Yeah, there are other things that are more important. Yeah, like running the business, right?
Exactly. And I think that is something that for a lot of customers is also the case. They are hidden champions in their area. They are really doing well. They are producing some amazing goods, but securing an IT landscape is not necessarily, or at least wasn't until recently, top of mind for them.
Yeah, and I think that's one thing you mentioned is putting even your SAP system is no longer isolated, and it's not necessarily that the SAP system has a direct internet connection. If you look into how an attacker typically gets into your environment, there are so many ways how they could get into your environment. So because it's easier to show it on a slide than just talking about it, I prepared obviously a slide to. So a typical attack is still some to get you to click you in a URL, and they get so sophisticated doing that. So it's no longer that phishing email that is the same for 1 million. They craft that phishing email specifically for your company, or even for specific functions in your company, so that you are like working in a corporate environment. You get an email that looks like coming from someone you collaborate with. So it looks like it's a real email. And then it's so easy to click on the link because they try to have like an urgent issue in that email. Like you have 5 hours to respond before we do this and that. And then there is always someone that clicks on the URL at the end of the day.
Yeah, and sometimes the real name is on the header, and you're not able to see that's a phishing email.
Yeah. So this is really that has become a real business, to get insights of your company and then craft that phishing email specifically for you. And this is then the first step for an attacker. And what they really like to do, they like to get it to a chance to install something on your system, obviously. This is then what we call the exploitation installation. At the end, to have something like a command and control system to move laterally in the environment. And this happens really fast. So we have a lot of insight, and we published that in our digital defense report. And one of the interesting numbers there is it takes about 1 hour and 40 minutes in average before the attacker is going to move into laterally in your environment. So after the first infection, less than 2 hours.
Wow.
And then, what they really try to do is they try to have a high privileged user account being compromised to get more footage into the environment. And at the end, like attacking your SAP system. So that's one of the important systems, obviously, in your company. The bad thing is that's not the only way attackers are able to get into your environment. So another thing that happens very often is directly compromising an account, either by brute force, so just trying to guess your password, or it's still the case that users use the same password for their enterprise systems and for the private mailer or their shopping site. And those attackers are able to get that connection that it's the same user. So then the password is leaked, and they can log on to the system. And our Chief Information Security Officer, Brad Arsenal, has a quote that really hits the nail there. It says, "Hackers don't break in, they log in." So all they want to do in the first place is getting an account they can use for moving in your environment. And one thing worth mentioning is there is also an attack that is probably not the first thing you would think of, is getting into your environment by an IoT device or an OT device that is in your production environment, in your production line. And those systems most likely are older systems. The firmware is not patched because it's part of the production lines, or you're not able to just patch the system. So this is more often a really easy way of attackers to get into the environment. And those formerly disconnected OT environments now also get connection to the enterprise IT, because, for example, if you're a manufacturer and you have an automotive customers, they want to have insight in your production line because they need to have that in their systems, like 10 years to, if there is a case, if there's a problem, they need to go into the details to tell the when have that been produced, and if there are other goods in the same line, if they're affected as well. So that all those systems are no longer disconnected.
So it's kind of the same as we see, or I tried to explain with the SAP systems. It's not that isolated environment where where just some of those machines can connect to each other. It's getting more and more connected through everywhere in the plants, in the factories, and even at the laptops of persons or the mobile devices that are attacked, and then hackers get access to at least SAP data, for example.
Yeah, so hackers are always trying to get the weakest point in your environment, and there is a probably funny but not so funny thing that happened in Vegas like 4 years ago, where an attacker used a temperature sensor in a fish tank, which was connected to the back end to get into the environment, and at the end they got I think they downloaded the accounts that are used in the casino. So it sounds funny, but that's really how attackers work, trying to find the weakest link to get into the environment.
Interesting, yeah.
Yeah, so it sounds funny first, but it isn't funny if you really think through that. Yeah, and then at the end, the goal most likely of an attacker is exfiltration of data. We see other patterns like destroying your data, which is something that's commonly used when we talk about nation state attacks to just cause damage. Also, another way they want to do is monetization by encrypting data. So there are different results when the attacker gets through and gets access to your backend systems. But exfiltration of data is probably if you have intellectual property there or data, which is you want to protect. So this is something they can get money off. And another thing you should think of is something that is called insider attacks. So data leakage is also sometimes caused by someone who leaves the company and wants to get some data with him to use in the next job he gets, or an administrator that somehow got frustrated and downloads data and try to sell it. So different ways really how damage could be caused. But at the end, if you follow that zero trust approach, you need to make sure that you have a protection for each and every threat here on the slide. Yeah, the good thing is there are solutions. So if we want to have a look into what we as Microsoft provide, and I don't want to marketing here, so I wanted to go through that real quick. We do have a solution to protect against phishing attacks. So as I said, phishing email is still a way that is frequently used. We do block over 700 million phishing emails per week with that solution. So we reduce the number of phishing emails that really get into your mailbox, but still there are a few that get through. As I said, they are specifically crafted for the environments they want to attack. So there is a chance that there is something undetected. If that happens, obviously we need to protect the endpoints. So endpoints are those IoT and OT environments, and your laptops, your workstations. So those endpoints that are used by users, to make sure if something is installed on the system, that you detect that as soon as possible, and hopefully are able to do something against it. For the other attacks, when we're talking about like a brute force attack, we also have solution. One of them is built into Azure Active Directory, so we detect like leaked credentials and make sure you know about it. But also, if you have someone in the environment that tries to move to other system, we provide a solution to get insights and to alarm you. For example, if there's an administrator that has never logged onto that system, or never has logged on at that time of the day, or never has logged on from that location, this is a sign that there is something happening there. And Yeah, attackers are most of the times for a long time undetected in an environment. So as sooner as you get information there, the higher is your chance to protect your systems. And also that insider risk management I talked about, there is a solution we provide there to get insights in that environment. But at the end of the day, and Holger, you mentioned at the beginning, the question is if all of those measures we have fail and you get to the system you want to protect, like your SAP system in the cloud. We then talk about what can we do with Azure and what we can we do in the cloud. And I will take some time to give you some insights there. So if we look into what we call the Defender for Cloud, which is a solution to protect your resources in the cloud. First, we provide you insights, and insight means like a high-level view. How well is your environment configured? And this is then reflected in a secure score. And that secure score now tells you from like 1,000 recommendations, how many of them are implemented. And the more you implement, obviously, the more secure is your environment, because these recommendations are based on our own experience, controls out of regulatory compliance. So this really gives you a good way of having a good feeling and a good implementation of security in the cloud.
Yeah, really great, Martin, that you're showing us that. I know from my customers that they are really looking at the security score and having goals to, for example, reach at least 80% of the secure score. Otherwise, they cannot go productive with the solution. So it's really used in at the companies, and let's dig deeper into that.
Yeah. So the good thing about that secure score, it's not just a number. As I said, it's based on recommendations, and obviously we give you that insight. For example, if we have here a subscription, an Azure subscription, or also we do the same thing for AWS and GCP. So it's not just a solution for Azure, but yeah, the scope of our talk today is Azure. So if we have a subscription and if we click on that few recommendations, we like double click into that environment, and then the recommendations are broken down into several segments. So for example, if you have a system that has management ports, yeah, it's good practice to close those management ports and not have them accessible in the internet from the public. So if we detect systems that are not following that recommendation, they're pointed out here. If you click on the recommendation, you will see which resources, in that case, which of the virtual machines is not configured in the right way.
But what does that mean, close the management ports? When I, as an administrator, want to access this VM, I need that access because I have something to do at my SAP system. I want to patch my OS, for example. So we have a just-in-time access then, or?
Yeah, that's part of the solution. So first of all, we encourage you to close those management ports so they're not publicly available. But then, there need to be ways to access the system. Obviously, one of them is what you just mentioned. We call just-in-time access. So if you're eligible for accessing the system, and this is something that needs to be configured up front, then you have a way to request just-in-time access. And you could also have like an approval there, but if not, by accessing and then requesting that just-in-time access, we open the network security group, which is part of the configuration for your specific system. So the port is not available for everyone in the internet, but just for your specific IP address. And this is also something which is time bound. So after the maximum 8 hours, that is closed again. It's locked, so you can audit it. So really a secure solution for providing remote management there.
Yeah, that's really cool. And what I really like there is actually if someone comes to me and says, look, let's make your system more secure, I probably wouldn't even know where to start.
Right.
And here with Defender, I have a nice checklist. And I like what you said, Sebastian, in the beginning, that some of your customers are trying to at least have a score of 80% or whatever. So there's really some guidelines that we are providing customers to make this system more secure. So even if you don't know where to start, here's a good starting point. Go down
exactly.
This
I mean,
checklist.
The main thing here is you get insight. So you can't change what you don't know what's wrong. So
exactly,
just by getting that information, getting that insights that you have systems that might be vulnerable because of that different configuration gives you a lot of actionable items there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and then of course we do have solutions for protecting the systems, and this is also something which is different when we look at an on-premises environment. So, for example, if you have a database on premises and you want to have like threat protection, you obviously would go then and install a kind of a threat protection solution. If you have like storage, you need to have a specific solution for storage, which you probably need to deploy and configure. And in the cloud, those functionalities is built in, and you just need to enable it. And there's more often none or just a few configuration items there, and you have a specific threat protection for a SQL server that knows how a SQL specific attack looks like, or for a storage account that knows that if someone is trying to pull data from a storage account and a big amount of data, this is something that is suspicious. Or if someone puts a file on a storage, we look into the file and make sure that there is no malicious code into that. So this is all built into the platform, and all just to be enabled in order to protect that systems.
And defend the services to get hacked. Yeah, the last point here was, for example, the Microsoft Defender for the resource manager. So a hacker can maybe build a new VM, and the service can protect our environment to give the hacker the possibility to do so. And I think there are some other points here in the list that are also worth looking at. For example, the DDoS attack that we are protecting against. Martin, what is your opinion on this DDoS attack mechanism?
Another of those platform services. So you're probably aware that we do have DDoS protection for each and every system in Azure. So there is a basic DDoS protection. But if you have a system and have a production system in the cloud that provides services to your customers, you probably want to have a more specific configuration of that DDoS protection. And this is exactly what that DDoS standard, how it's called, gives you. So on top of that basic protection, we fine-tune the rules there and make them specific for your workloads. We give you insights into the logs so you can do analysis. So it's just the higher level of protection. And if you would have something like that on premises, this is again something you would need to implement, or your network guys would need to implement. And in the cloud, it's just something you enable and have that protection from that point on.
Great. And the last point I want to mention or want to ask is the MFA, because I think when it comes to SAP, and we heard from you that users are stolen to get access to the SAP MFA, I think can really help in combination with single sign-on to prevent a hacker get to get access to the SAP system.
Yeah, definitely. So that's not something that is so specific for Azure. That's more like a general item and something we like call out for years now. And it's so obvious. So like, if you have multi-factor authentication, something like 99.9% of all account compromise attacks are prevented. So you're able to really reduce the number of successful attacks by nearly 100% by using multi-factor authentication. In that digital defense report I mentioned are also some insights like 90+ % of all compromised accounts were not protected with something like strong authentication, so like multi-factor authentication. If you look into how attackers work when they get into the environment, 75% of all acquired elevated credentials are then used to get malicious payload into your environment using the SMB protocol. So it's so clear that protecting your credentials and using MFA to do so is a number of the top priority, should be the top priority for everyone to really have a higher level of security.
And actually, it's super easy to install, right? I mean, on Azure Active Directory, it's a check mark that you want to enable MFA, and then to get this on your mobile, I mean, that's another app or that you install, and then it's done. So it's a it is really a huge benefit, a huge security benefit if you have it.
Yeah. So I wouldn't call it that easy. You just mentioned you need a phone typically to have an authenticator installed. There are companies where, most of the companies where not every employee has a company phone. So you need to have some preparation, obviously. Also, we don't recommend to just enable an MFA for each and every one, because then your user get used to that MFA prompt, and this then opens a way for attackers to force you to MFA. So something we provide is we call conditional access, where you have rules. And for example, that rule would say, okay, if you're logging on from a corporate device, if you have something like Hello for Business that provides you strong authentication, then we don't want to put your MFA prompt there. But if you have a device like in an internet cafe from a location you never logged on, we probably want to make sure you're really where you say you are. And then it makes sense to have that MFA prompt. So doing that in a way that you just force that when it's needed is really something we recommend.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
But now we are looking at this whole end-to-end story. So starting from the device the customers are using or the user is using, till the SAP system and the whole infrastructure in between, and so the whole story from the user until the user can reach SAP data, for example, can be protected not only with the tools and stuff we have seen here, but also with MFA, which is also outside of Azure, because it's also on the device of the user, on the mobile, or when he logs on with Windows Hello, to have another example with face recognition. This is also something where we can get rid of those username, password, and the user only logs in with the face recognition, and on top with the MFA, we can have even more a higher security level, because when it really comes to high protected data that gets accessed, then we activate the MFA process for this one. So it's really end to end.
And it needs to be end to end. So if we have again a look into that slide, if you have blind spots, like not protecting one of these areas, you make it easier for an attacker to stay in your environment, to get undetected for a longer time, to get insights. This typically means the result will be a more sophisticated attack, more damage, more data loss. So the longer the attacker is in your environment, the more you will lose at the end. And another thing I want to point out before we really go into those SAP specific topics, the integration between those components is really crucial. So as I said, less than 2 hours before the attacker starts to move. So if you don't have that insights, like the detection in the first line of defense that really pops out somewhere, and you have the correlation, okay, that the same user that was a victim of that phishing email is now the one that installs the software, the malicious software, then you will give the attacker so much of a chance to get undetected. So integration is really key here, and that's something that we do with a platform approach we have. Like all of the Defender products are getting into the same security portal, but also with the Sentinel solution, with the SIEM tool that now also gets like data from the network, and also have now a connector into the SAP system. So for example, if you have like a user login onto your SAP system that was a victim of a phishing attack, there's a high probability that that is the same attacker. So getting that level of insight and integration gives you so much of information if you hunt for threats and if you want to hunt the attacker down. So integration is really key here. But yeah, we're in an SAP podcast. So Sebastian, I think it makes sense to get into more details about how we are protecting SAP systems and what is our take there.
Yeah, do you want to click then for me? But first, stay on the slide, please.
Yeah, sure.
So what needs to be considered to secure the SAP environment? I think we heard a lot of them with the end-to-end story. So because the user is in 95% of all cases, the user is the root cause of the hack. But securing the SAP system is also sometimes a challenge. And Sentinel, because we have it on the slide here, and this new SAP connector of Sentinel really is helpful to get more insights in the SAP system itself. So it really connects into your SAP client and really can connect and show you what happens in your SAP system. So it can read system logs, for example, or transactions that are running sensitive ABAP programs that are used with the stolen user, for example, or privileged users that access your system that are normally not using this account. So there are a lot of insights you will gain when you use this Sentinel for SAP connector out of your system. So it's really a scanner of your SAP system. What happens with connections in and out? Is the gateway secured? So all the things that needs to be considered when it comes to SAP security. And this is really helpful.
So, but that's still the outside view. I remember there was also something like a blog post from SAP that talks about ransomware and how important it is to also securely configure SAP itself. So that's something also that needs to be configured when we talk of an end-to-end zero trust model, right?
Yeah, you said it's an outside view. From my point of view, it's more a view into the inside of SAP. But nevertheless, you need to secure your SAP system as well. Yeah, you need to have a blacklist and whitelist on your gateway, for example, that not every program can connect to your SAP system via the gateway. You need to have, and this is a very important point because we have seen it on our first slide, security patches need to be installed in your SAP systems because they are used to really actively attack your SAP system, and this is really a critical thing to have those newest patches, security patches into the SAP system. And
yeah, in fact, I came across a report a few days ago, and they called out that like 72 hours after a vulnerability for SAP has been released or is known, this is weaponized the first time to attack a SAP system. So patching is obviously a top priority here to protect yourself.
I mean,
and
always.
yeah,
Not only for SAP, but for everything, I would say.
Yeah, totally agree. Yeah.
definitely. But SAP data is sometimes more important for hackers than maybe other data.
Yeah, I mean, the reason why we're in that talk today is that we and also SAP sees that there are sophisticated and targeted attack against SAP systems now. So we're no longer in a world where it's just by accident that a SAP system is part of an attack. This is intentionally built for SAP systems to really get that data and use the data for whatever reason.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So the hackers have SAP know-how.
Yeah, they do.
Yeah, and securing SAP systems is not just security patches or gateway and RFC connections, but also the SAP kernel. So more looking on the infrastructure level. The kernel of the SAP system should be on a good new release. The OS patches for sure are also important because all of those puzzles fit together, and if there is a hole in this puzzle, the attacker will use it to attack your systems.
Definitely. Yeah, and that's exactly what we like to talk in the last minutes. What can you do to prepare yourself if an attacker is successful? So if all those things we show in the slide are not enough to stop the attacker, and so let's take a look into what we can do here.
Yeah, and this is something everyone, every SAP customer or SAP admin can start now right away. I would really recommend this document we have mentioned here, and we will link it under the YouTube video because it really describes how what is an attack and what can happen if you get attacked. So it's not just encrypt your data, it's exfiltrate the data and corrupt your backups. So it's not just one thing you need to have in mind. And there are other aspects as well. So for example, what is the financial loss if a hacker get access to your data? Yeah, what happens then with your factory, for example? Are employees able to work even if you have an attack?
Yeah.
Maybe not. And the second point here is the DMZ. So most of you already have a DMZ network design where your sub-router, for example, is placed. But maybe those special hardened devices can bring more security. So the secure access workstations, so-called, that are for your admins, for your SAP basis admins, or other guys that really have access to critical infrastructure and data, can be secured here.
Yeah. So if we think about that phishing attack, for example, such a device wouldn't have an email client. It probably wouldn't even have a internet connection, if that's feasible, to really make sure that no one is able to compromise that device and to have at least that the access to your SAP system from an administrative perspective as secure as possible.
Yes, and the immutable storage is the third point here, and I think this is really worth to looking at. From my point of view, I really would recommend to use this technology to protect your backups even on-premise or in the cloud. So you can use Azure Blob Immutable Storage, for example, to have a warm functionality on the storage. So write once, read many. So once this backup is stored in this immutable storage, nobody is able to encrypt the backups that are stored there. So I really encourage you to look at this technology and use it for your backups.
Yeah, makes totally sense. Yeah, and then from a security perspective, obviously it makes sure to have an understanding what's your current environment and how it's configured and what might be topics that you need to change. So we do have partners that are specialized in that security area, and that could help, for example, with a assessment to get that insights. Also, yeah, it's a good idea if you have that plan. Try it out, make that fire drill. And yeah, we do have technologies in the cloud, and we'll talk about that in a bit, that makes that so easy to have that test of your recovery plan and make sure it really meets your objectives. And in general, have something like a ransomware playbook. So make sure everyone in your IT and your company is aware of what needs to be done if really something happens. So whom to call, what to do, write that down, and try to make also a fire drill for what is in that ransomware playbook helps so much.
And I think that's actually something really, really important. I mean, it has nothing to do with IT or the tools that we're providing, but when you are impacted, then I think everyone is so much under stress that it's really important to have a clear guideline and say, look, we'll just follow this list and go through this. And obviously, if you practice this up front, then that's actually something what I when we were talking to Microsoft IT about backup and restore, disaster recovery, and what always impresses me there is that they do these backup restore tests on a very regular basis. Like I think 2 times a year, they do a full backup restore test for their SAP environment, obviously now. And because of this repetition, it's so normal for them, so that ideally, hopefully, when it really happens, they know exactly what to do. And I think that's also really important now for the whole ransomware story, that that everyone knows what to do, or at least the key persons know what to do, so that when something happens, the team basically knows what are the steps that needed to be executed.
Yeah, and it's more like an education and planning topic than really an IT topic. But if you have, as you said, if ransomware is in your environment, that shouldn't be the point when you start thinking about what to do. It should be something like written down, exercised, and you're still getting stressed for sure, but at least in that stress situation, you should have a clear guidance what to do. Yeah, and if bad things happen, we talked about it, disaster recovery, that would be probably the next thing that makes sense. So, Sebastian?
Should I go first?
For sure.
What's not shown on the slide, and this is what I would do first, is connect your on-premise network to the cloud, because otherwise it's hard to secure your data, to copy securely your data into the cloud. So this is missing in this slide. So even if you have a VPN connection, a secured VPN connection, or an express route, which is an MPLS, should be the first thing you should consider, and then you can use Azure Site Recovery in a securely manner, and copy, for example, your SAP backups into this immutable storage in the cloud to have it there in case there is something going on in your on-premise environment. And another thing not mentioned on the cloud, if you have this connection, not mentioned in the slide, is if you have the connection to the cloud, you also can think about using database technology to build asynchronous replication into the cloud, like HANA system replication, where you have the possibility to have another copy of data in a different location. And maybe you can use the same technology to migrate and transfer the data when you are migrating your SAP system into the cloud. So you can use the same mechanisms to do so.
Yeah, that's a very valid point. So it's not just like having Azure site recovery and all this done. You need to have like really a recovery plan that, as you mentioned, that might have some other techniques for databases, not just like copying the disks into the cloud and making sure they're running. And the nice thing about that Azure site recovery then is you have a recovery plan in the tool. So you might have like 5 automated tasks, starting your databases, starting your application server, but you also might have manual tasks you need to carry out. And that is all part of that recovery plan. And it's easy then to have that fire drill, because we're able to then recover that in a specific network in Azure, which is not connected, and you're able to make sure that your plan really works. Yeah, and last but not least, I mean, we love to see you moving your systems.
Hardware from your software, and this is a new level of reliability and security you can have. And even if you get attacked or infiltrated successfully by ransomware, you can build it from scratch in a new subscription that is completely decoupled from the things you had before, and you can use this automation to rebuild the whole infrastructure components. So your ramp up after this successful attack is much faster than you will ever have the possibility to do that on-prem. So this is really something that brings value. The deconnection of hardware and software, and this automation, and for sure look at the SAP security best practices to really harden your SAP system as much as you can. And I think there is a lot of content out there. Check it out. Also, partners are really good in securing landscapes and SAP systems. So it's really worth to have an eye on this important topic.
Yeah, you mentioned partners. I think security partners have been mentioned in the first slide to get an assessment, but also working with those partners to make sure your configuration is secure. It makes a lot of sense, because it's really hard to stay on top of all what that happens. So having a partner that is really concentrating on that stuff and helping you to get the right things implemented makes totally sense.
Absolutely.
I think that's some fantastic closing words, actually. And I like the summary, Sebastian, what you also said, and here this the usage or the separation of infrastructure and the software, basically, that can really help with this whole back to business notion, that I can have a very quick, clean start basically on Azure. So if I am attacked, if I am impacted, and as we mentioned in the beginning, if it's most likely not an if but when. So if I am attacked, then using infrastructure as code, I can quickly really wipe everything. I can start from scratch. I can use the immutable storage that you talked about to set up my infrastructure again, to have my critical systems up and running again in a fast time. So that's hopefully something that can help customers get back to business quickly again.
Definitely. And yeah, we mentioned it. It's not just us that we see that this is really a threat. So also something SAP mentioned, and this is really a good post in the news center that discusses the SAP specific actions that are needed. And at the end, if we follow all those best practices, we probably have a situation like Campari. They get compromised, but at the end, they're really able to quickly get back to business, right?
Yeah, and worth to add to that, the systems that were in the cloud already were untouched because of the zero trust approach Campari Group had implemented. So this is really a bold statement to back to my story I'm telling at the beginning. SAP systems are not in the internet, and Azure is a secure place for your SAP systems, and a private and encrypted at rest, and a really stable platform to have a secure environment on it.
Yeah,
perfect.
I think these are the perfect closing words for that.
You're right. It cannot get better than this. So that's really great. Fantastic. So Sebastian, Martin, thank you so much for your insights on the security related topics. I think this is something that is top of mind for a lot of customers at the moment, and I do think we do have some great answers on Azure. We have some good partners that help us, or that help customers to secure their SAP systems on Azure. But as you said, Martin, also this goes beyond SAP, obviously. There are a lot of components that play together. But I think, yeah, thank you so much for providing a really good overview, good insights in the topic. And I'm sure we'll see each other again on the podcast.
Thank you, Holger.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.